I thought, would be go through like all of Revelation real quick and just point out the places where people get messed up. But because people today will go to Revelation without rightly dividing, without dispensations, they get in a mess. And I probably the last 4 or 5 years have gotten so many emails and things like that from people where they're like, hey, Brother Breaker, look what it says in Revelation. Why, that's today. And I'm like, no, I don't. And a lot of people think we're actually in the book of Revelation today. So I thought what we do is rightly divide the book of Revelation, and I'll go through and show you in the book of Revelation many of the places where people wrongly divide.
Today, we're taking another look at the book of Revelation, a part of the Bible many of us know quite well. But here's the thing, no matter how many times we've explored its chapters, there's always something new to uncover, especially as the world around us keeps changing. It feels like the events it talks about are drawing closer every day, right? That's why we're diving back in, but with a twist. We're on the hunt for fresh perspectives and hidden gems we might have missed before. Whether it's a verse that's suddenly more relevant than ever, or a symbol we're seeing in a whole new light, we're going to dig deep. So, for all of you who think you know Revelation inside out, I challenge you to join us as we uncover new layers and meanings. Ready for a deeper dive? Let's get into it.
The book of Revelation. Is it past or future? You know, there's some people out there that say the book of Revelation, it's just a book of past and it's not future. A preterist is someone who says, I believe the book of Revelation was finished in 70 AD. Revelation chapter 1 and verse 1, the revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. The rest of the book is all future. It's not even for us. We don't even read it. It's all for after the rapture. Well, you start reading the book, it talks about 7 literal churches that existed in the time of the guy who's writing it. So there's some past in it, but that applies to the church age, which is future. And we're in that today. We're in the Laodicean church period today.
The very first thing that Robert Breaker takes a start with is the book of Revelation itself. Now, according to him, there are many people who think that this book is for the past only, and it has nothing to do with the future. However, that is not the case. The best indication of a person's future behavior is to look at their previous behavior. It's not to say that people can't change. It only means that people seldom change. They usually don't change. If you want to get a good indication of what they're going to be like in the future, just look at how they behaved up until that point. That's why we need to be new creations. We need the Lord to come in and do a miracle, because apart from the miracle of God in our life, we human beings are not naturally prone to change. We like to keep things just the way they are. Someone who doesn't know the Lord, or someone who claims to know Him but is not walking with Him, or is in a carnal state of being, they're probably not going to change unless something dramatic happens. Similarly, we can look at history and notice that it tends to repeat itself. The explanation for this is that individuals rarely change. Things can change, but people rarely change. Therefore, history tends to repeat itself. That holds true whether it's your personal history, the history of nations, or the history of mankind. Now, according to Breaker, in the book of Revelation, it is the same way. John sees these things, he records these things, and in some cases more explanation is given to help us understand all that has happened before. But it's hard to bring that all into context when you're dealing with just one chapter at a time. To give you an example, it's just like when you watch a movie. When you watch a movie that is 2 or 3 hours long, and you have watched it all the way to the end and you know how the story goes and how the story ends, then you watch that movie again, you see it quite differently the second time around. According to Breaker, you're able to make better sense of why people said what they said, and why they did what they did, and why the story seems so convoluted the first time around compared to the second time around. It's because you have the benefit of seeing the whole story, the whole timeline. So it's beneficial to read through the whole book of Revelation before you start trying to understand each chapter.
It is saying, I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last. What thou seest, write in a book and send it into the 7 churches which are in Asia. 2 Timothy 1:15, this thou knowest, that all they which are in Asia be turned away from me, of whom are Phygellus and Hermogenes. So we're under Paul's ministry, and we're following the doctrine given to Paul, which number one was the most important, justified by faith. And yet the book of Revelation's given way after Paul, and it says to the 7 churches in Asia. That's the 7 churches that turned against Paul. Well, first thing is, it sounds like they turned away from the true gospel.
Up next, Robert Breaker talks about the 7 churches, which is also something important to look at in the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation has 7 letters addressed to 7 churches in Asia Minor, Revelation 2-3. Each letter, as spoken by Jesus and recorded by John the Apostle, declares the recipient church's victories and failures while warning them to repent. According to Robert Breaker, the advice in these letters is prophetic, warning contemporary Christian communities of the traps that can lead them astray from their religion. Thus, we need to be cautious about that as well. Revelation's 7 churches were among several early Christian communities in Asia Minor. These particular 7 churches may have been chosen to receive Christ's apocalyptic message because, geographically, the churches were located along an established circular trade route that brought together the most populous and influential parts of the province. Once the apocalyptic message was given to the churches in these prominent cities, the message would spread to the Christian communities in the rest of the province. Although the 7 letters in Revelation are tailored to the named churches, these churches and their stated deficiencies can symbolize all churches in one respect or another. Therefore, the instruction given to Revelation's congregations is valuable to Christian congregations today. Apart from that, according to Breaker, some people also question the rapture in the book of Revelation. In chapters 2 and 3, Jesus' letters to the 7 churches contain valuable lessons that can be applied to churches of all ages. But the figure of the 7 also depicts the church's history. The connections are clear and irrefutable. The final phase is that of Laodicea, in which the church is predominantly apostate until the Lord returns. This appears to be the age in which we now live. Revelation's record about the Laodicean church in chapter 3 and the beginning of chapter 4 seems to indicate that eventually there comes a time of profound falling away from the faith. Then, at the end of this period, the church, which is referred to as the genuine believers, is taken out of the world in what many scholars call the Rapture, and that is what Robert Breaker is talking about here.
The book of Revelation, in the book of Revelation, we've got 2 types of saints. And a lot of people don't get this. A lot of people think that whenever there's saints in the book of Revelation, it's all of us today. And they've got the rapture here in the middle somewhere or here at the end. And so they've got the church going through the tribulation. So when they see saints, they think that's us, the church. But there's 2 different kinds of saints in the book of Revelation. There's us today, we who are saved today, we are saints. Did you know that? And we go up at the rapture to heaven. A person who dies during the tribulation period is a saint. And we call those tribulation saints.
The next thing that is being talked about by Robert Breaker here are the saints which are mentioned in the book of Revelation. According to him, many of us have known about the tribulation for as long as we can remember. However, few of us know who the tribulation saints are. In Revelation, the Bible describes a remnant of the church who will face the wrath of Satan, his demonic forces from the pit, and the Antichrist. These are the saints who live through the tribulation. As the end of the ages approaches, men will be running from one place to another in search of a better existence. People's faith will be tested, and poverty on earth will escalate to the point that many attempting to survive will embrace the mark of the beast. However, those who have surrendered to Jesus Christ will not sell their souls to the devil, but will face adversity head-on in order to obtain eternal life with the Lord Jesus in heaven. These are the saints who will endure the tribulation time on earth and be martyred in the Lord's name. Some Christians believe that Jesus will return to his church before the tribulation period begins. Others believe that the tribulation will occur before Christ returns. Before or after the Lord returns to take his people home to heaven, there will be a tribulation period on earth, and God's living saints will be caught up in it. The saints on earth will be one of the main focuses on the Antichrist's agenda, and that is being described by Robert Breaker here.
This last 3.5 is the Great Tribulation. And that's when all the bad stuff happens, like God pours out his wrath and things like that. There's going to be 7 future years that we call the tribulation period. The Bible calls it the time of Jacob's trouble. It's the final week of Daniel, 7 years. But it starts with the 3.5. The last 3.5 is the great tribulation. When we get into the book of Revelation, we have to talk about the 144,000. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on the Mount of Zion, and with him 144,000, having their father's name written in their foreheads. Now, as you begin to read through here, you find out who these are. And they are not the Jehovah's Witnesses. In fact, guess who they are? Turn over to Revelation chapter 7. They're Jews. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Of the tribe of Judah, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Nephilim, Manasseh, Simon, Levi, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin. These are your 144,000.
Now, we as Christians know that there is going to be a time in the future with great suffering for the believers of Jesus Christ, which is known as the Great Tribulation. There is something that is being talked about by Robert Breaker here at this point. The tribulation period in Revelation is a time of great upheaval and trouble. Great evil will be unleashed on the earth. In the Old Testament, it was referred to as the time of Jacob's trouble, as seen in Jeremiah 37, which says, "Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it. It is even the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it." Jesus probably was referring to the Great Tribulation that is to come when he talks in Matthew 24:21 about great distress unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. The world as we know it will never be the same again during the tribulation period. The Bible states that a time of great trouble shall come on the earth, and the saints still living will go through a period that no one has ever experienced in humanity's history. The horrors that will occur during the Great Tribulation will be real, and the world will not escape it. Food during the tribulation will be scarce, and only people who take the mark of the beast will be allowed to buy and sell. The people that refuse to side with the Antichrist will be hunted down without mercy and killed. The world will be in turmoil as the martyr's blood flows. During the tribulation era, as time passes and the world becomes chaotic, the Antichrist will destroy the tribulation saints, mostly to prevent the gospel from spreading. The Antichrist will ceaselessly wage war against the end-time saints, finally executing them for upholding Jesus Christ's testimony. During the tribulation, the saints will face numerous spiritual, emotional, bodily, and psychological challenges. Following John's vision of the impending disasters soon to be inflicted upon the world, the scene changes, and 4 angels representing the 4 winds of heaven are told to hold back these winds until the servants of God have had seals placed on their foreheads. John then reveals the number of those who are sealed. Drawing an analogy between the 12 tribes of ancient Israel and the Christian community regarded now as the new Israel, he gives the number of 144,000, or 12,000 from each of the tribes of Israel. Before the seals are fully opened, another set of disasters emerges in the form of 7 angels, each bearing a trumpet. The sound of these trumpets heralds physical disasters such as the arrival of a large earthquake, the turning of rivers into blood, the darkening of the sun and moon, and the falling of stars from heaven. Following these horrific physical phenomena, God's wrath will be unleashed more directly on those who attack Christians. Before revealing the nature of the visitation, John compares the authority now wielded by the Roman emperor to an evil entity who has been at odds with the forces of righteousness for generations. And that is what's being talked about by Robert Breaker here.
The mark of the beast. Now, there are some people out there today that say we're in the book of Revelation and that the mark of the beast has already been given on the world. Let's go to Revelation chapter 13. Now, I don't have time to read all of Revelation chapter 13, but it talks about the coming of the Antichrist, how he's assassinated, verse 3, wounded to death, and how he continues for 42 months, verse 5. And as you read all the way down here, you go down to verse 15. And it's talking about the mark of the beast. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed.
The very last things that are mentioned by Robert Breaker here are the mark of the beast and the coming of the Antichrist, both of which are mentioned in the book of Revelation as well. According to the book of Revelation, The evil that is mentioned in the book is none other than Satan, the arch-enemy of God, who is now putting forth a supreme effort to destroy the righteous from the face of the earth. He is the dragon who launched a rebellion against God. John tells us that there was war in heaven, as Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and his angels. The result of the conflict was that the dragon was cast out of heaven, and 1/3 of the angels were cast out with him. This same dragon worked through King Herod in an attempt to destroy the Christ child as soon as he was born. His work has continued ever since, and according to John, he is now trying to accomplish his purpose by working through the Roman emperor. His evil character is manifest in the cruel persecutions that are being inflicted upon Christians. In characterizing this power that now appears to be gaining mastery over the world, John resorts to imagery used in the book of Daniel to describe the wicked ruler who tried to coerce the Jews into submission. The author of the book of Daniel uses the symbol of a great and terrible beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. In like manner, John uses a beast to represent the Roman emperor, whose image was stamped on the coins used in the empire. At one point, John is quite specific in his identification of the one symbolized by the beast. He says, "This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is man's number. His number is 666. John is seemingly referring to the Roman emperor, but he is also personifying the forces of evil, and his condemnation of the emperor is due to the fact that John believes Satan is incarnate in the actions of the empire, for Satan and the empire are linked together for the achievement of a common purpose. According to Breaker, as the end draws near, John recounts the angels of heaven calling out in a loud voice. 3 angels approach, the first announcing that the hour of God's judgment has arrived, the second proclaiming that Babylon, Rome's emblem, has fallen, and the third explaining the horrible fate of those who worship the beast or its image. However, the great catastrophic events that bring an end to all of the kingdoms of earth will also be the occasion for the return of Christ to the clouds of heaven. As Christ approaches the earth, the wicked people will be slain by the brightness of his coming. For a period of 1,000 years, Satan will be bound, and the earth will be desolate. During this time, the righteous will be made safe in the city of God, which is the New Jerusalem. At the end of the 1,000 years, the city of God will descend to earth. Then the wicked will be raised from the dead, and after making an attempt to overthrow the city of God, they will be destroyed in what John tells us is the second death. The final chapters of Revelation provide a dazzling description of the New Jerusalem, complete with gold streets, jasper walls, pearl gates, and the river of life that will flow eternally from God's throne. In this celestial paradise, there will be no grief or sobbing because God will wipe away all tears and there will be no death. But in the end, writing to the people of his own day about events that would happen while they were still living, John states that Christ will return while those who put him to death on the cross are still living. The permanent significance of Revelation lies in the author's conviction that right will ultimately triumph over evil, and that is being described by Robert Breaker here.